This program was made possible by the Florida Humanities Council. We come from all over, and we become one state, where we share in the history and become part of the culture that is Florida. The Florida Humanities Council, bringing Floridians together by sharing the stories of our state. And by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
In the legendary land of the Fountain of Youth, where fable and fantasy still beckon, dreams of a perfect life in paradise inspired the creation of 4 unique communities in Florida. For these spiritual seekers, Florida was the new promised land and perhaps heaven on earth.
I think Florida is conducive to spiritual community. It's a place where people come to retire. It's a place where people have a vision of a kind of ideal life. And so people are drawn to Florida for that reason. And I think oftentimes they're willing to experiment with different ways of creating an ideal communal life. Florida has always been a land of dreams, and so it's conducive to this kind of experiment.
In this land of dreams, experiments in creating communities centered around a shared ideology began in the late 1800s, when members of 2 very different religions moved to the remote reaches of Florida to build their version of utopia. Isolated and insulated from general society, these spiritual pioneers were free to create a new life in this land of promise. Led by spirit guides, followers of a movement called Spiritualism established a warm winter retreat in Central Florida in 1894. At the Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp, members communicated with inhabitants of the spirit world, the dead, through mediums, seances, spirit trumpets, and other phenomena. That same year, the untapped potential and promise of Florida enticed another religious seeker, Cyrus Koresh Teed, who founded the Koreshan Unity in Estero. Teed was a proponent of cellular cosmogony, the belief that the entire universe existed inside a giant hollow sphere. His religio-science of Koreshan Unity also included the then radical ideas of equal rights for women, reincarnation, and communism. At a time when Americans marveled at the mysterious phenomenon of electricity, the possibility of spirit communication, and a science that turned the world inside out didn't seem far-fetched.
The United States is a very interesting place. It's a grand experiment. Never before has there been a society that was based on separation of church and state. All right, the state has nothing to do with religion in this country. So what you have is a free religious economy. And this is a country of entrepreneurs. And so when people have a unique vision of reality, of something that they want to share with other people, they can start a new religion in this country. It's as American as apple pie.
Religious entrepreneurship continued, and in 1976, Ma Jaya Sati Bhagavati established Kashi Ashram on 80 acres in Sebastian, Florida. Unlike the Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp or the Koreshan Unity, Kashi Ashram didn't focus on one shared religion. Instead, this interfaith community welcomed anyone from any religion or no religion. In contrast, one religion is clearly at the heart of one of Florida's newest master-planned communities, although founder Tom Monahan denies that the town of Ave Maria in Collier County is Catholic-centered or even a spiritual community. Despite foundations centered on God and good intentions, each of these communities struggled with detractors. 3 of the communities survive, so far. 1 did not. Spiritualists established the site of their winter retreat on the property of George Colby, who was led to Central Florida by his spirit guides to help establish a spiritualist Mecca. Although spiritualism offered answers to the universal question of what happens after death, the religion that professed to communicate with the dead was denounced as a fraud by most mainstream churches. Despite spiritualism's dubious reputation, these spiritual seekers were welcomed in Florida. The spiritualists shared many cultural values with their Florida neighbors, and few viewed them as the deluded devotees of a bizarre religion. Instead, they were accepted as ordinary people, free to pursue their own version of the American dream.
Certainly the religious environment around Cassadaga was largely conservative Protestant. But because Florida was a place where people would come and visit, either as tourists or to spend the winter, you had a kind of a pluralistic cultural background there. And so I think Floridians tend to be a little bit more tolerant of diversity than certain other places in the Deep South. And the fact that they were bringing in money, they were bringing culture, there were all kinds of lectures, concerts, dances that were taking place at Cassadaga. It was allowed to exist because it didn't really threaten the larger community, and it was contributing something of value to the larger culture.
The Cassadaga camp eventually became a year-round spiritual community, but interest in spiritualism ebbed and flowed over time. Most of society still stigmatized spiritualism, but interest in the unorthodox religion revived after both world wars, when the desire to communicate with wartime casualties rekindled interest in the religion that connected the living with the dead. Today, the mysteries of the spirit world still attract seekers and sightseers to Cassadaga.
This is a spirit trumpet. Spirits don't have larynxes, so they can take ectoplasm and build a little larynx in here and speak through it, and the voice will come, and it would be a voice that someone would recognize, like your mother, your grandfather, but it would sound slightly tinny.
Everybody's searching for answers right now. Everybody, whether they believe in spiritualism or not. I have many people who come to me and said, I never thought I would be here, but I just have to get a few answers.
We have a vast majority of Americans who are dissatisfied with the traditional teachings of Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, whatever it is. It hasn't worked for them. They are seeking something that connects to the soul, the mind/soul, and explains things and gives answers to questions like what happens to us when we die.
The camp is now the oldest continuously active spiritualist center in the southern United States, still rooted in spirit communication and still mired in myths and misconceptions.
Well, we don't talk with the dead. I have to correct that because people think we talk with the dead. We don't. We talk with the living on the other side. It's important because you get a view of what the next dimension is like. See, that's the unknown. That's what people fear. Life is continuous. There is no death. Death is a transition. Death is a change.
The core belief of spiritualism is the continuity of life, and that those who have passed through to the spirit world can communicate with the living through mediums.
You have a lot of angels with you, but angels are more there to protect you and guide you.
The camp offers an extensive training and certification program for these vital message bearers.
A medium is someone who can actually see spirit, can actually touch in. Not all mediums have the same talents. You raise your vibration. Spirit fluctuates at a very high vibration. Quantum theory, everything has an energy. When you start mediumship classes, you may see faces, you may see colors. Eventually, the longer you keep at it, the more you can see with your third eye chakra. I've been seeing spirit since I've been 8. So it took me 4 years to pass their education and curriculum to actually put my sign out there and say, hey, I can really do this.
In addition to private readings, mediums give messages during Sunday church services and during public readings that help demonstrate the continuity of life by connecting the living with relatives and friends in the spirit world.
She says, thank you for remembering her. Take your step forward. It'll change your life, and it's time. You're ready for that. And she says, leave the fear, because that's not helping you.
Although mediums play a vital role in spiritualism, the camp now offers services that go beyond the quest to communicate with the spirit world.
The spiritualism that's practiced at Cassadaga today is very different in some ways from the spiritualism that was practiced in the 19th century. There's not as much emphasis on seances, on table tipping, on physical demonstrations, all of the different kinds of things that were used in the 19th century to prove the authenticity or the reality of the spirit world. It's much more about therapy now. So spiritualism has really adapted itself at Cassadaga to more of a sort of a new age kind of spirituality that's very eclectic and that allows lots of different beliefs and practices to be employed as the individual sees fit. But there's still an underlay of spiritualism there.
Spiritual healing is now a key part of spiritualism at Cassadaga, and spiritual healers, like mediums, must go through a rigorous training and certification program. Free healings are offered weekly in both the healing gazebo and during Sunday church services.
A healer is a channel of divine energies from a higher vibration, and we are the instrument. We act as a channel for those energies to flow through us to those who come in need. The healing can work for a physical condition, a mental state, an emotional situation, or on a spiritual level. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes for the spiritual healing. And we all work differently. We're all attuning ourselves with the higher divine healing energies. We work with the major energy centers. So people may experience warmth. They may experience a tingling in the body or a surge. And those are some things they might expect during the healing. Healing is a form of mediumship. It's just we are the channel for the healing energies. We don't give messages, but we do convey or have those energies transfer through us.
More than 40 certified mediums and healers now live within the 57-acre camp. Many own houses on land leased from the Camp Association. Only church members can live within the camp, ensuring a nurturing environment that offers a fulfilling sense of spiritual community.
The people who want to come and live there, many of them feel misunderstood by the larger society because of their alternative belief systems, and they feel that they can be themselves there and be among other people who are tolerant, respectful toward their own private kinds of beliefs. And I think that's really important for people, to be able to feel like they belong somewhere and that they aren't being judged for their particular religious perspective.
Of course, the draw of being here and wanting to live here is to become a medium, to take the classes, but to be around like-minded people, you betcha. That's the main reason.
People, especially in the United States today, have such a sense of isolation. I'm alone, I'm by myself, nobody knows I'm here, nobody cares. You get into a small community like this, people know each other. Of course, it's got its downside, you know, the gossip and all that kind of thing. But people, they know each other, they care about each other, they care for each other.
More than 100 years after its founding, Cassadaga remains a spiritualist mecca, offering sanctuary to spiritualists and solace to spiritual seekers.
I think the secret to Cassadaga's success is that it provides a service to the larger community that's not going to go away. The fact is that people lose loved people. People are hurting, people need healing, and I think as long as they offer that to the larger community, they're going to be successful and continue on.
While spiritualists built their metaphysical mecca in Cassadaga, the founder of Koreshan Unity, Cyrus Koresh Teed, received a revelation foretelling the golden age of his religio science arising in the wilds of southwest Florida. On the banks of the Estero River, the charismatic Teed envisioned his New Jerusalem, a city of 10 million that would usher in a new world order. It was a timely vision. Teed was wearing out his welcome in Chicago, where his controversial group was based.
He had a following of very wealthy women. Not all were widows. He had some alienation of affection suits against him. I'm sure that energized his move to the South, as far away from Chicago as he might get from some individuals, some husbands perhaps.
By 1894, the Chicago Herald estimated that the controversial Utopian Society had nearly 4,000 members nationwide, mostly wealthy women whose relatives began to question the motives of the enigmatic leader.
Estero served as a very fine location for them because it was close to some type of community, Fort Myers, and yet Fort Myers was small enough that it was not a threat. So we could have a small community that was not too close to the prying eyes of powerful newspapers.
In 1894, Teed began building his Koreshan Utopia on 300 acres in Florida's final frontier, far from irate husbands and interfering detractors. Within a few years, the remote outpost included a 3-story refectory that served as kitchen, dining room, and dormitory for women. Men lived in a log house dormitory, while Teed and his co-leader, Mrs. Annie Ordway, lived separately and celibately in the master's house. Teed believed celibacy promoted the conservation of vital energies, and all devoted disciples were required to abstain from sex. In addition to building his New Jerusalem, Teed was determined to prove his hollow globe theory, and in 1897 began a series of scientific experiments on the Naples beach using a gangly contraption of right-angle beams called the rectilineator.
If we live inside the Earth, then the curve is going up. If we run a straight line out, sooner or later it's going to hit the side. So what they did is took this rectilineator in multiple pieces, set it up on the beach, made sure it was level, and measured down to the ground. And then they would shift pieces and keep going. Now, if their theory was correct, the number should get smaller, and they did.
Teed offered $10,000 to anyone who could disprove his theory, but his complex mathematics provided irrefutable evidence that the Earth was hollow, and no one was ever awarded the bounty. Despite detractors who distrusted Teed and his radical ideas of cellular cosmogony, celibacy, and communism, Koreshan Unity appealed to a growing number of spiritual seekers, especially women.
He had his illumination, and God came to him as a woman. And at that point, he realized that God was this dual being of both male and female. And that led him to believe that women were equal. Before women's suffrage, he was out there professing equal rights for women. He was giving high-level jobs and high-level responsibility to women 40, 50 years ahead of its time.
In addition to Teed's female co-leader, the community was also governed by 7 other women who lived together in a house called the Planetary Court, named after the 7 planets known at that time. Outside of this celestial circle of leaders, the community also included families with children who supported the Koreshan ideals and were willing to live and work communally. By the early 1900s, more than 200 people lived in the Koreshan community, nearly half of the entire population of Lee County.
Teed had magnetism. He certainly possessed this dynamic personality that people were drawn to, even though you might find his ideas of the hollow earth, living inside of the earth as a curiosity, looking at that twinkle in his eye, the embers of coal fire burning within him. You were drawn to him. Additionally, there was that comfort of community in a society that was fragmenting, in a society where the gulf between the rich and the poor was growing ever more dramatic. There was a promise of a different path, that you could belong to this community where your needs would be satisfied and where there was a promise that there was going to be a better future. A very powerful proposal to people who were beginning to feel lost.
By 1904, the bustling community included a machine shop, laundry, a boat-building operation, apiary, cement works, and a bakery that could produce 600 loaves daily. The Koreshan Unity purchased a large generator and became one of the first communities in the region to electrify. Into this remote backwater, the Koreshans also brought culture, building an art hall for art exhibits and entertainment.
They staged plays on a regular basis. They had an orchestra and a marching band. They had readings of poetry. They found ways of entertaining themselves and to stimulate their intellects. People would come from Fort Myers to listen to the music, to see some of the plays, which made for a very close bond between the two communities, with the Koreshans and the larger community in Lee County.
By 1904, the commune owned more than 7,000 acres, and Teed incorporated his Koreshan community as the City of Estero, with himself as head of the city. The fragile bond of friendship between the Koreshans and Lee County was stretched to the breaking point.
The idea of turning Estero into a city produced the first serious shockwaves. It immediately became apparent that people living in the southern part of Lee County were going to be incorporated. They were going to have to pay taxes without having any voice. That caused a great deal of consternation and began to provide seeds for future conflict. That was resolved. It was resolved by allowing people to opt out, although Teed and the Koreshans did blithely state that they were not going to be allowed to use the Estero River, a threat that was never carried out. But those threats that the Koreshans would periodically throw out did serve as barbs under the saddle for the people of the community.
A tenuous peace reigned until 1906, when the Koreshans were accused of block voting in a local election, and their votes were thrown out. In response, Teed formed the Koreshan Progressive Liberty Party and started a party newspaper, the American Eagle. Tensions rose, and months after creating his own political party, Teed became embroiled in a fistfight with the Fort Myers town marshal and was badly beaten. He never fully recovered. The dynamic, difficult leader of the Koreshans died in 1908. As the self-proclaimed Messiah of the Koreshans, Teed was supposedly immortal. His disciples stood by his side for 3 days, awaiting his resurrection. Finally, Lee County health officials heard of the vigil and forced the burial of the venerated leader.
As soon as he passed away, it suggested that there was something wrong with his teachings. There was a hope that he might return, but he never did.
Despite the loss of its charismatic leader, the Koreshan Unity continued.
When he died, it may have been the best thing for the stability of the community. Now, certainly, upon his death, there was fragmentation. The community went through a dramatic transformation. There was a withering away of some key leaders. And yet, by 1919, this community is at its most stable point, probably more stable than it had ever been with Teed, because Teed was a disruptive fellow.
The community was stable, but stagnant. The Koreshan Unity couldn't grow without the center of their universe, Teed.
It's very difficult to bring people in once that charismatic figure is removed. The Koreshans lack some of the advantages of other groups. Their philosophy was too complex, too bizarre for a general audience to accept. This is not the type of religion that is going to be able to attract followers without the Messiah. And once the Messiah dies, as with most of these groups, the communities will ultimately wither away.
Members drifted away or died, and by 1940, only 35 Koreshans, all elderly, lived within the community. The once vibrant community was fading fast when Hedwig Michel, a Jewish refugee from Nazi Germany, joined the Unity and briefly revitalized Teed's utopian vision. The Unity operated a general store on the Tamiami Trail and restored some of the buildings and grounds. But the commune couldn't continue without new members. In 1961, the last Koreshans donated the community site to the state of Florida, and Teed's Utopia became a state historic site.
The community obviously failed in that Cyrus Teed did not rise from the dead, that the New Jerusalem was not established, that the Koreshan Unity did not become the city of millions of people leading the world for 1,000 years. That was a failure. But did they satisfy the personal needs of a number of families, over 100 people, for a significant period of time? Yes, they did. And in that respect, they're a success. Other communities can learn from them, learn both the mistakes they made as to why they should not challenge the community in general, and the things that they did right, and that once the founder passed, they managed to hold on for a fair number of years and to do reasonably well. An excellent example of communities succeeding even though we see them as failing.
The counterculture was going strong, experimenting with new spiritual ideas and Eastern philosophies, when a Jewish housewife in Brooklyn, New York, received a visitation from Jesus Christ.
I mean, just picture, first of all, I was Jewish. I thought he had the wrong house. I mean, I'm still Jewish. But the first thing he said to me was, teach all ways, for all ways are mine. And I do teach all ways.
The former Joyce Green became Ma Jaya Sati Bhagavati, and in 1976, she purchased 80 acres in Sebastian on Florida's East Coast and founded an interfaith spiritual community called Kashi Ashram. Kashi, meaning City of Light in Sanskrit, immediately began to attract attention and apprehension in Sebastian.
I started off in Florida because I thought the warm climate would be good when people come to see me if they were older, never thinking there would be an epidemic like AIDS, and I began a lot of work right from the beginning with the AIDS virus, and then working with older people.
The community that embraced all faiths and all people was too different, and trouble began.
First of all, there were just a handful of folks here, and the first thought I think of people was, what is going on out there on Roseland Road? What are they doing? This is different. Or who are these people? And people used the word cult, which we thought, what's that? Ma will tell the story of the KKK burning a cross on our lawn. And then when we started working with people with AIDS, then everyone was afraid because there was so much ignorance around AIDS. I think that's the reason we came here. I think we knew in advance that this was not going to be the kind of place that would understand what we were doing. If you don't go to a place like that, how can you affect change?
Typically, when somebody forms a new spiritual community, it's because they are addressing problems in society, whether it's homelessness, hunger, spiritual hunger. And so these communities oftentimes have an alternative way of dealing with societal issues. The larger culture, defending its normative ways, sometimes is suspicious and even hostile toward these kinds of spiritual communities.
Despite the derogatory label of cult, Ma's ministry grew, and her fledgling community, dedicated to promoting spiritual awareness and service to others, eventually became an acknowledged and accepted part of the Sebastian community.
I'd say the community perception of Kashi has definitely changed, and the reason for that is they see us now as individuals who really care.
The ashram's long dedication to service has won over many critics. Every week, Ma's Feed Everyone program distributes free healthy meals and bags of food staples to those in need in 2 poverty-stricken neighborhoods near the ashram. During the holidays, Kashi members also give gifts and more to the people they serve.
It's developed into something more of a family. People trust us, and in the beginning when we went there, they looked at us, you're another one. And now, every time that we go there, we're getting closer and closer.
Helping to ease lingering fears of Kashi, the program focuses on feeding the hungry, not recruiting new members.
I never went out and preached, and I never will. Because I had learned very early in life that when you don't have a full belly, you can't hear about God. You can't hear about service. The only religion there really is here is the religion of kindness. I won't accept somebody being unkind. And serving, you'd be surprised. People want to serve.
On the lush grounds of the ashram, the Ganga Pond, named after the sacred river in India, serves as the centerpiece of the community. The interfaith nature of Kashi is reflected in the shrines and temples surrounding the pond, honoring many of the world's great spiritual traditions.
Kashi Ashram is a state of mind. It's a state of heart. It's an essence. Physically, a spiritual community, interfaith spiritual community, but it's a safe haven. We've been called a vacation from hate by people who feel like they can come here and be themselves. We're a community of service, and a lot of wonderful people live here who come from different walks of life and different paths, different passions. But the thing that unites us is commitment to the teaching of service, as embodied by Ma. Ma's my guru. Guru means dispeller of darkness. That's who I study with. She's my inspiration. I want to be like that.
Although detractors have called her a cult priestess, Ma's teachings have attracted a diverse group of spiritual seekers. More than 70 members live communally at Kashi.
We pay rent for food and for upkeep, and people have jobs, and you have to contribute, and then people contribute service, so you have to help. 4 nights a week, the residents here are taught by Ma. So we get to let go of the world for a few hours and be guided to go deeper inside ourselves and integrate our spiritual path into the world.
Oftentimes people join spiritual communities simply because they're looking for a family. They're looking for a place where they belong, where people are loving and kind and take care of them and share their ideals.
Every week, Ma also leads a public meditation and class.
Feel the freedom of meditation. We're not a religion. We're about spirituality, about being kind to everyone.
To augment her teachings, the charismatic founder of Kashi also developed a new form of yoga.
Inhale, reach up to the sun. Tuck the chin, reach back to the moon. Keep squeezing Mother Earth with your toes. Inhale, reach up to the sun, and back to the moon. Ma has given us a yoga called Kali Natha Yoga. It's an ancient yoga that is a series of flow series, asana flow series. It's really who we are, it's our lineage. There's no separation between this yoga and what Ma teaches us every day. It's almost a way of living that teaching. So you learn the teaching of kindness, you live it in the yoga, you feel it, you touch it, and then it's easier to share it. It's actually a way that we serve our community. There's no restriction on who comes. In fact, we encourage people.
I think successful spiritual communities are able to invite people from the larger community to come and visit, to be a part of their life, and then they go out and they do service work to that larger community.
Kashi's focus on service to the larger community recently inspired an innovative partnership with the state of Florida. The By the River project opened in December 2009 and offers affordable housing for seniors and a chance for residents to live independently, yet within a community setting.
The design and intention was actually to elicit community, support community. We have it so that they share, they come together and commune for dinner and meals. I think somewhere along the way we got away from community as a society. We now are challenged with how do we share in community, how do we bring community back? Ma, my guru, my teacher, always says there's no throwaway people. So we strive to make sure as many of those that feel alone don't.
I wanted to live here because where I lived before I was very lonely. I've been alone for the last 5 years. And here, there's going to be more people here and I'll feel more like being with a family.
Although By the River is part of the ashram complex, residents are free to participate in the Kashi community, or not, as they see fit. But the option to be a part of an intentional community sets By the River apart from mainstream senior living facilities.
I think what By the River is doing is very important because I think baby boomers don't just want Sun City. They don't just want a recreational community. They also want something that they believe in, something that makes a difference in the world.
Today, more than 30 years after its founding, Kashi Ashram and its charismatic founder continue to attract spiritual seekers.
You have a living guru who is highly respected and highly venerated by her followers. So that's a real magnet in and of itself. And the loyalty that people have to her is very, very important. I would say it's really the glue that holds the community together. Because part of her teaching is service and caring for others, they've been able to reach out into the larger community, serve the larger community in all these different ways. That has also allowed them to be welcomed and valued by the larger community, so there's no longer a kind of hostility that they're encountering with the larger community here in Sebastian and in this part of Florida. What will happen after Ma's no longer here? That's an open question, but they seem to be building a community that's sustainable into the future.
Unlike the Koreshan Unity, which couldn't continue without its dynamic leader, the timeless teachings of Ma may prove enough to maintain this spiritual community.
Her teachings are timeless teachings of service and love, and I think the more humanity becomes entrenched in all the power and greed and all the pain that's caused in the world, the more humanity becomes entrenched in that, the more people are going to seek out solutions within themselves and in community. And I think community is really going to be a major part of the answer. The more people embrace the need for love and changing themselves, the more they're going to gravitate toward places like Kashi, and we're the model. I don't know any place like this.
In 2002, another religious entrepreneur saw promise in the remote reaches of Southwest Florida. And like the Koreshan Unity more than a century before, this new community would stir controversy and debate with the outside world. Tom Monahan, a devout Catholic and the billionaire founder of Domino's Pizza, was searching for a new home for the Catholic college he'd founded 4 years earlier in Michigan, when he received an answer to his prayers. The Southwest Florida-based Barron Collier Development Company offered to give Monahan 750 acres in rural Collier County for the site of his new university. In return, the company would develop the 5,000 acres surrounding the campus with residential and commercial projects. It seemed like a match made in heaven. Monahan, dubbed the Pizza Pope by the press, told reporters, quote, "I think it's God's will to do this." He unveiled plans for the first Catholic university to be built in 40 years and an adjacent town that would become a Catholic hub governed by conservative Catholic principles. Both the university and the town would bear the same name, Ave Maria.
I first heard about Ave Maria in around 2002 when Mr. Monahan began to talk about building this great Catholic community in Southwest Florida. And Ave Maria University was very involved also in the early discussions of creating this Christian Catholic community. I thought it was a wonderful idea to be able to live in a community with a Catholic ethos, a community where we could raise our children as Roman Catholics. And I began to follow the progress until they announced that they were building homes and that the homes would be available for sale. And then my husband and I began quickly to put an offer on a home, and this is how we're here.
Monahan invested more than $200 million into his City of God, and former tomato and vegetable fields began to sprout neatly laid out subdivisions. Plans call for 11,000 homes and condos at build-out, with a projected population of 25,000. Work also began on the centerpiece of the town of Ave Maria, a towering $25 million Catholic cathedral designed to seat more than 1,000 people. Monahan's dream was becoming a reality when he made a speech that raised eyebrows and questions about his vision for Ave Maria. During a speech in 2005, Monahan proclaimed he would, quote, "control all the commercial real estate so there would be no pornography sold in the town. We're controlling the cable system. The pharmacies are not going to be able to sell condoms or dispense contraceptives." The American Civil Liberties Union stepped in, concerned that a religious group was trying to exercise governmental power.
We should all be concerned in the communities where we live if the rights of individuals are being warped by a powerful influence that is in effect denying us the right of free access to anything.
Monahan began softening his rhetoric and eventually addressed what he called the growing misconception that Ave Maria was a Catholic-only enclave. In fact, unlike the Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp and Kashi Ashram, which are both private enclaves, the town of Ave Maria is a commercial development, and federal fair housing laws prohibit discrimination based on religion. With the ACLU keeping close watch, the ultra-Catholic dogma was downplayed, and the secular virtues of the town were emphasized. But the towering Catholic cathedral remained the undeniable centerpiece of the town. Marketing officials emphasize that the town is not a spiritual community, and Monahan respectfully declined to be interviewed for this documentary.
I think Ave Maria is both an intentional community and a commercial enterprise. Tom Monahan is a spiritual entrepreneur, but he's also a regular entrepreneur. I mean, he didn't make lots of money by only selling pizza to Catholics. This is a community for like-minded people of a certain conservative Catholic bent. At the same time, it's also a regular community in the sense that it's a real estate venture. Florida is certainly no stranger to real estate ventures. Tom Monahan sold Ave Maria as a kind of a dream, and Florida is a place that has been largely sold by the dreams of real estate developers. Tom Monahan's dream is just a little bit different.
Balancing the dream of Ave Maria with the legal and economic realities of a commercial development is part of the continuing story of the creation of community in Florida.
This tension between the private and the public was really there from the beginning, was probably bound to come up in one form or another. And I think it's also important to contextualize this. Florida is the land of the gated neighborhood and the planned community. These kinds of tensions between what can be public and what can be private, what a developer can control and what is a matter of public access, are things that are endemic to a lot of Florida communities. What's happened in Ave Maria is that it's had a specific religious focus, but I think the phenomenon itself of that boundary between public and private, which is obviously a civil rights issue, is something that isn't just a problem for Ave Maria, but it's something that affects the whole state.
Mr. Monahan built a huge church in the middle of town. He promoted it as a Christian Catholic community. He attracted that kind of resident here, and then decided, because of laws, that he needed to switch and turn the town into a secular town. Why would Catholics come here if the Catholic identity of the town is being denied? But then why would secular people, why would families who are not interested in Catholicism come here when he's put this huge church in the middle of town?
Nearly 300 homes were built in the town of Ave Maria, but by 2009, applications for building permits were dwindling.
The fate of Ave Maria as a development is in part a story of the real estate bust in Florida. This is one of the many dreams that was conceived during the gold rush years of Florida real estate. I think the mixed messages having to do with what type of community it is may have contributed to that, along with its somewhat isolated location. The future of the town may depend on distancing itself from its particular Roman Catholic identity, but may also depend on embracing it more and more. I think one thing in Ave Maria that is still a draw, regardless of the economy, is the university itself.
Although Monahan denies that the town of Ave Maria is a spiritual community, Catholicism is at the core of his private university, which now includes an undergraduate school and the Ave Maria School of Law. In a 2007 interview with Florida Trend magazine, he stated his goal for the university was to be, quote, "not a diploma factory. We want to be a saint factory." The two most popular clubs at the school are the Chastity Team and Students for Life. Both Ave Maria students and town residents make bi-weekly treks to Naples to protest at Planned Parenthood of Collier County.
The town scares us because we know
what the history is of some of the organizations that Tom Monahan has been involved in. Tom Monahan was one of the largest donators to Operation Rescue, and Operation Rescue is one of the most violent anti-abortion groups in the country. When you have an organized opposition, you can always breed that fringe that's going to strike out.
Please come and see us. We have free information, places that you can go that will help you so that you will not have a life of regret for having destroyed a life.
We're happy to express our faith, live it out, not be made fun of. You know, it's just a town. Anyone can live there. It's nothing magical. But there's a lot of people there that have good, strong faith, good, strong morals, and they're not afraid to express it. We really enjoy that.
I think that people who choose to live in Ave Maria are choosing a particular lifestyle. I think that people that choose to go to the schools are also choosing to adhere to their philosophy.
Like the Koreshan Unity more than a century ago, the town of Ave Maria stirs debate and detractors.
Mr. Monahan is in charge of the university. He is part owner of the town as investor with Baron Collier. So he has tremendous control and influence here. He's an employer for a lot of people here.
Several Ave Maria town and business leaders declined to be interviewed for this documentary.
It's consistent with what we think is happening, that they wouldn't want to be interviewed because they're doing business in a big way with that organization.
They can continue to use the name Ave Maria, which is probably the most holy words for a Roman Catholic. Hail Mary. So if the town is not Catholic, they should not be using the name of the Mother of God, such a holy name for Catholics that is misleading people here. They need to change the name and truly name it with a secular name.
Ironically, the imposing centerpiece of the town can't technically be called a cathedral, since Monahan owns it, not the Catholic Church. For the town surrounding this towering tribute to God and one man's vision, the future is unclear.
The future of Ave Maria may depend upon the future of real estate in Florida. If the real estate market bounces back, I think it's quite possible that Ave Maria bounces back with it. If it doesn't, Ave Maria will probably have to question its identity. It may become more of a university town, or it may die out like some of the other housing developments have in Florida. But if things do come back, it's possible that Mr. Monahan's vision will be fulfilled and people will be there both for spiritual purposes and for commercial purposes. And in that regard, Ave Maria may well fulfill the old joke that people used to say about the Quakers in Pennsylvania, which was they came to do good, but they wound up doing well.
Florida, the land of dreams, still beckons with its promise of paradise. Yet increasingly, Florida is also a land of isolation, where neighbors are from somewhere else and communities are defined by gates.
Florida is a place where you have lots of people who migrate in from other parts of the country, so there's not that sort of established community base. People have to create it when they come here. They have to find it.
For more than 100 years, Florida has offered religious entrepreneurs the chance to start from scratch and create a different kind of community centered on shared ideals and a shared vision. Being a good neighbor is the key to long-term success. While the Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp and Kashi Ashram offer seekers spiritual fulfillment and supportive service work to their neighbors, the Koreshan's clash of cultures with the outside world serves as a cautionary tale in the creation of successful spiritual communities.
We study utopian communities because people such as the Koreshans wanted to establish the perfect society. Today, scholars study intentional communities, that is, communities where people come together to try and create good lives for themselves, lives that have meaning beyond themselves to serve others. And that is, in a sense, a pared down sense of utopia, something where we can depend on one another. In a sense, utopia of the heart and utopia of the mind.
Kashi and Cassadaga and Ave Maria and the Koreshans, they were all examples of attempts to create a kind of utopian existence, a kind of place where you would feel comfortable bringing your family, raising your family, where you feel safe, where you have a kind of common spiritual bond and spiritual commitment.
In the universal quest for a fulfilling life and the utopia of the heart and mind, these communities offer templates for success and failure, and perhaps hope for seekers looking for a place they can call heaven on earth.